Tēnā koutou katoa, we're just about to get started, so just wanted to welcome everyone here today. I'm Lisa, here on behalf of CPAG. Thank you all for getting up bright and early. I want to thank our wonderful MC and our incredible lineup of speakers. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time. We're really looking forward to hearing your insights. From CPAG's perspective, there is positive in the budget that we really want to acknowledge, and importantly, really want to acknowledge the hard mahi that has gone on by so many people to get so many of those wins over the years. So ngā mahi, that's an awesome win that we want to acknowledge. From CPAG's perspective, however, if we're going to end child poverty, we need to be addressing the systems that are locking people into poverty and creating that cycle. And unfortunately, from our perspective, that's where the budget is critically falling short. And the thing about those systems that we know are operating, that we know are restricting people, limiting people, and causing harm, the thing about those systems, though, is they were created by people. And that means we can redesign the system to end child poverty. And that's our biggest call to government today, and we're really looking forward to hearing the korero from people around the impacts of this budget and how we do see that bigger change. Thank you, and let's get into it.
Inga mana, inga rio, inga karanga tangama, tira kutukatua, koramil tokingwa. National Executive Members of FANZ, Public Health Association of New Zealand, and Chairperson of Public Health Association Wellington. Now my harumai, the Public Health Association of New Zealand, it is committed to supporting the WHO United Nations Social Development Goals. FANZ values include support for those who most need it, to improve their health and well-being so they can flourish. What the funds do? It encourages equal access to healthcare and resources for every New Zealander, improves conditions and influences laws and policies that affect everybody's health, provides a collective voice on public health issues, supports organizations to work together, provides national, regional, and local events to share information and ideas, supports Maori and Pacifica people in public health. Also, we have total members till today is 480. Why Public Health Association of New Zealand? There are lots of benefits for joining it. Our members mention things like the opportunity to gather, share, and learn with others in public health, being part of collective voice for public health, the chance to influence public policy and help improve the health of New Zealanders, free access to public health research and resources, discounted attendance at our conferences, keeping up to date through our website, social media, regular publications, such as our weekly electronic bulletins, policy spot, etc. Members open for everyone, all around the year, doesn't need to be public health oriented person, anyone from the community. And you can contact anyone of us if you are interested or more interested, want to know about Public Health Association. We are proud to be part of this ongoing post-budget breakfast event since many years with CPAG. Mi mahi tai tato mote aranga ote katoa. We are together for well-being. Kia ora. Thank you for coming. Namihi mote haere maiki kone. Thank you for coming. Kia ora. Thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. I am Gail Duncan, Chair of the Social Justice Group here at St Peter's on Willis. I am thrilled to welcome you, both those with us online and those of you here in one of the homes of social justice in Wellington. Since 1848, this building and community has sheltered earthquake victims, given sanctuary in 1913 to waterside workers being chased down Willis Street by Massey's Cossacks during the Watersiders strike, started the nuclear-free Wellington movement, helped settle refugees, supported those in the community who needed care and sustenance, founded charitable organisations, and is now welcoming you all as advocates for the rights and support of our children, our future. St Peter's Social Justice Group and our colleagues here today provide a voice for children in many forums at local and national level, including presenting to select committees. The strength of our combined voices are acknowledged by the presence of city councillors and politicians here today. To be a fair and just society with prosperity for all, we must advocate strongly for our children to have equality of opportunity, freedom from hunger, safe care, and a home to grow up in. Social justice demands that we speak for those who don't have a voice in our society, that we advocate and speak the truth to power, that we demand that the basic human needs for children to flourish and grow into mature and productive citizens are met for all the children growing up in this country. At St Peter's, we encourage and support an open, multi-faith community based around our Willis Street campus, supporting ECTA and Ethnic Food Bank and the Free Store, which provides free food contributed by cafes and food suppliers in the Wellington city area. The Free Store collectors push their trolleys in the footsteps of Mother O'Bur, founder of the Home of Compassion, the first providers of support to disadvantaged children in this community. Welcome to you all. Listen to the messages of our presenters and go and advocate for our future, our children. Now let me pass you to our MC, Josie Pagani, who will lead this important session. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou whanaunga, ki te mana whenua, Ngāti toa, tēnā koutou. E te tupunu e tu nei, haere, haere, haere. Nau mai haere mai ki te whare e tu nei, te wahi tapu, St Peter's, e te kaupapa o te rā, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora everybody, welcome to our community leaders, our politicians. Thank you for being here so early in the morning after a big day yesterday. To our community leaders, and to all of you here who are working in this important kaupapa. And my name is Josie Pagani. At the moment, I've just been tramping in Stewart Island, and I was with my friend and our young adult children studying, and we realised that our wonderful children were doing really useful things like training to be doctors and engineers and lawyers, okay, maybe not so useful. And we thought, well, what do? I have rabidly ill-informed opinions every week in the media at the moment, and my friend writes children's books, so we weren't feeling very useful at all to the world. So I'm very happy to be here to be supporting your organisations and feeling that this is such an important mission that we are all on. I do have some useful things I do in life. I work in the aid and development sector, and it's really wonderful to see some of my colleagues from the Council for International Development in the audience and on the panel. Certainly the kaupapa of development and aid is the same mission that you are all on too. We work in the Pacific on poverty reduction, and there is nothing more important than working with the poverty reduction of children. So it's very good to be here. I want to start the proceedings in the right way with a karakia. And to start off with, I would like to call on Reverend Jean to come and do the karakia.
Kia ora koutou, ngā mihi atu ki a koutou. Welcome to the space. Normally on a Friday morning, some of us would be gathering here for morning prayer, so I invite you, welcome you to morning prayer this morning. Our morning prayer is slightly longer than usual, And so I'm going to begin with some prayer, but before I do that, I am going to do the health and safety emergency spiel. And I was just thinking, as I was sitting there, that maybe that's actually what we're here for, about health and safety for our children and our people of the country. We're attending to those things that we need to know and that we need to be ready to act in. So if there is an emergency, I will leap up, or Stephen will leap up, and we'll give you some instructions. So the first instruction is don't panic. If there's an earthquake, it's pretty hard to drop, cover and hold when you're sitting in a pew, but do the best that you can. This church building has been here, this particular one, since 1879 and has withstood many earthquakes, so we're probably fine. And then we will direct you to exits, which will either be the exit on this side or the exit through the doors that you came in. If you need the wharepaku, the toilets, there aren't any on this level. This is, as I said, an 1879 church where there were no indoor toilets. And so you need to go on a little trek if you need it, which is downstairs. If you are imagining, they're kind of over there, but down a level. So you can either go around the outside and through the outside door, or down the stairs and across the big room at the back and through to the toilets. All good? So, let's pray. Let's be still and be aware of the presence of the Holy One who is within us and between us and beyond us. E te ariki tōhungia mātou, e te karaiti tōhungia mātou, e te ariki tōhungia mātou, e tō mātou matua i te rangi, kia tapu tō ingoa, kia tae mai tō rangatiratanga, kia mea tia tau e pai ai ki ringa ki te whenua, kia rite anō ki tō te rangi. O mai kia mātou aia nei, he taro mā mātou mō tēnei rā. Murua o mātou hara, me mātou hoki e muru nei, o te hunge harana kia mātou. Au hoki mātou e kawe kia whakawaia, engari whakorangia mātou i te kino. Nau hoki te rangatiratanga, te kaha me te kororia, ake, 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 amine. Never forget to show kindness, to share what you have with others. These are the sacrifices which God approves. Jesus, our deliverer, we take your freedom from others. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Jesus, our hope, we deprive others of hope. Christ, have mercy. Christ, have mercy. Jesus, God's shalom, we distort your peace. Lord, have mercy. Lord, have mercy. Jesus is the good shepherd who understands our frailty and knows each one of us by name. Let us know that we are forgiven. Let us be at peace. Let us choose to be signs of your forgiveness and hope, O God. Ho mai tau manaakitanga ki tō tātou huihuinga I tēnei ata. Bless our gathering this morning and give us courage to listen deeply and commit ourselves to bringing justice and aroha to all that we are a part of. Amen.
Kia ora, Jean. I'm reminded of an event I was at recently where someone did the health and safety and they told us to drop, cover and roll. So don't do that. Which confused everybody. So we're here to talk about the budget and Before I introduce the Minister, I thought one thing that stood out to me about the budget yesterday was the free prescription charges. And it seems little, but it's actually, when you've got a big family, it adds up to a lot. And there was a doctor from Middlemore last night who went on Twitter, and the doctor said this is one of the most profound things that they've seen in their 20-year career. They said that at Middlemore, patients were being readmitted when they'd been discharged with antibiotics for pneumonia, medication for heart failure, and then they were coming back. They were too whakama to tell people that they couldn't afford the $3 prescription fee. So they came back at $700 a night into the hospital because they weren't taking the medication. A $5 prescription fee stopped 135,000 people from collecting their prescriptions last year. Each extra dollar earned by the fee was costing $18 in extra hospital costs. So there are little things in the budget, and I know we're going to discuss it and we're going to pick it apart, but some of those little things are profound differences in people's lives. So I salute the government for that. I'm very pleased to start our proceedings by introducing the Honourable Priyanka Radhakrishnan. And of course, Priyanka is the Minister of Community and Voluntary Sector, known well to many of us. And I came across a lovely anecdote about you, Minister, which was that you grew up in Singapore, and one of your first jobs, aged 16, was as an educational entertainer, performing educational skits for kindergarten kids. So it's a lovely way of introducing the kaupapa that we have today, which is working with children to improve their lives. So, Minister, thank you very much. I welcome you to the stage. Please, a round of applause to the Minister. I look forward to your comments.
Ko te mihi tuatahi ki te atua, ko te mihi tuarua ki te whare e tūnei. He mihi mahana ki a koutou katoa, no reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Good morning, everyone. Josie, thank you for that very warm welcome. Indeed, my first job at 16 was that. It was also very early morning starts for some reason with kindergartens. It was very much, I was more dressed up than I was now, wearing sort of, costumes from different stories, but perhaps set me up for my job today, who knows. But anyway, thank you so much for that. Thank you for the welcome this morning. Can I also begin by thanking the representatives who are here from CPAG, from the Public Health Association of New Zealand, and the Social Justice Group here at St. Peter's on Willis. And I also acknowledge the vicars of St. Peter's on Willis, the Reverends Stephen King, Jean Malcolm, and Charles Waldegrave. Thank you for opening your church to us and for hosting us here this morning. And Reverend Jean, particularly, thank you for opening with karakia and so beautifully at that. Can I acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues? I see here Ibrahim Omar and Deputy Speaker of the House of Representatives, Greg O'Connor. And can I acknowledge everyone else who's joined us here this morning, both virtually and in person. As Josie said, there are aspects of the budget that will make a huge difference to many lives. But putting the budget together in the current global economic outlook was quite the challenge for all ministers and definitely the finance minister as well, because the current global economic outlook does make for grim reading. We've had, of course, the COVID-19 pandemic, followed by supply chain disruptions, including global labor supply issues, the energy crisis that was sparked by the illegal invasion of Ukraine. Locally, of course, we've seen multiple severe extreme weather events that have brought the increasing impact of climate change to the forefront of our minds as well. As the finance minister said in the House yesterday, it's hard to see any other post-war time when we have faced this much strain on our nation's well-being. And we're not alone in this. This is, the global outlook. This is the position that we're in globally as well. It's difficult times for everyone. However, we do face these challenges with a solid starting point. Our public debt is significantly lower than that of many other countries that we compare ourselves with, and inflation in New Zealand is in the bottom third of the OECD. But it's tough, and everyone across Aotearoa New Zealand feels the pinch when they're at supermarkets paying the bills, and for our most at risk, our lowest income households, the pinch is that much more acute as well. So this budget, of course, is the budget of the times. It's about supporting New Zealanders with the cost of living, but also delivering the services that we collectively rely on so that we can build the foundations for the future as well. Through Budget 23, we're investing over $2.5 billion to reduce household costs. The current budget makes childcare more affordable, and this will support low-income families, women, sole parents in particular, by reducing one of the key financial barriers to work. As Josie mentioned, removing the co-payments for prescriptions will help many. As we heard, 135,000 adults didn't collect their prescriptions in the year 2021 to 2022 just because of the cost, and there will be so many others who had to make critical decisions between things like food and other necessities and paying for those prescriptions as well. Half-price transport being made permanent for community service card holders and free for children as well. And I'll also add here, as the Minister of Disability Issues, half-price public transport for total mobility card holders as well. These collectively will result in significant savings for households. Extending the Warmer Kiwi Homes program, that's targeted towards families in whānau living in a low-income area or with a community services card, lowering energy bills and helping to ensure that children live in warm, dry homes. More children live in warm, dry homes. I remember when we took office back in 2017, the number of children that we saw with preventable respiratory illnesses because of the condition of homes that they lived in, and that's what we've been trying to turn around since we took office. And also, as the Minister of Disability Issues, I'm proud that we've continued through Budget 23 a record investment in the well-being of disabled people. $863 million to ensure that the 120,000 people who access disability support services can continue to do so. That we can continue through Whaikaha, the first ever globally, I understand, Ministry of Disabled People, that we can start to transform the sector from a health model to a social model, one where people have more choice, disabled people have more choice over the services that they decide to take up. And of course, we're ending the discriminatory minimum wage exemption as well through this budget. This budget comes on the back of a consistent and concerted effort by our government to shift the dial on child poverty. And indicators do show that these efforts are moving us in the right direction. As a government, we've supported average hourly wages to rise by 7.6%. We've had unemployment at record lows. We've supported programs like Ngā Tini Whetū, which is focused on improving the safety and well-being of tamariki. Whāmak supports or subsidises more medicines than ever, provides 75 new medicines, and widened the access to 137 different treatments. 2.8 million New Zealanders now have access to primary mental health care. Families have a reduced cost of seeing a doctor through the extension of low-cost doctors' visits to children under the age of 14. And we have more than 4,000 more nurses and 20% more doctors than when we took office. In education, nearly 3,000 more teachers in classrooms, and we've increased the maximum base salary rate for secondary teachers by nearly 20%, twice the increase that they got under 9 years of national. 10,000 more children receiving specialist learning support than when we took office in 2017. 1,300 more classrooms, 63 million free healthy school lunches that have been served to children, and that program, Ka Ora Ka Ako, has been extended through Budget 23 as well. We've reversed National's cuts to the childcare assistance as well. So this budget needs to also be seen in the context of the changes that we've made since taking office in 2017. Also, I'll just end with this, delivered nearly 12,000 public houses since we took office in 2017, compared to the previous government that left with 1,500 fewer than when they started in government. So we do remain committed to making New Zealand the best place in the world to be a child or a young person. As I mentioned at the start, this is a budget delivered in particularly tough times, and as always, there is more work to do. But can I end where I began, by thanking all of you. I know that many of you here this morning will wear different hats towards the same goal that we are all working towards, and for that, I thank you. I also want to acknowledge that particularly this week, Wellington has had an incredibly tough week with the fire in Newtown. No doubt many and those in the church here would have supported those who have survived that fire, and for that too, I thank you. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa.
Kia ora, Minister, thank you. And we're a little bit behind time. We've got time for questions. I also want to acknowledge, of course, it wasn't just the government that was busy yesterday, but the opposition. I want to welcome Louise Upston, thank her for coming today as well. And of course, Omar Ibrahim, lovely to see you here. I don't think there are any other MPs in... Oh, Greg's here. Oh, wonderful. Greg O'Connor, lovely to see you. So yeah, busy day for all of you guys. So we've got a couple of minutes. I think if we take maybe a couple of questions, we've got time for more questions later, but please keep your questions short. We do want to end this on time as a session, but yes, question here. And please say your name and your organisation. Yeah, good, cool.
Yeah.
Minister.
I mean, what I will say is that as the first step of the review of Working for Families, we have implemented changes, and I'm just looking at the figures here, that have meant that 346,000 families will be better off by an average of $20 a week, and an estimated 6,000 children lifted out of poverty as a result of that. And I mean, that was one of the families package was one of the first things that we did in office, and that included the Best Start payment, increases to the accommodation supplement, and a whole host of other things, including, I'll add, the winter energy payment that many have spoken to me about personally, even in terms of the change that it's making for them. The 1 April changes that came into play this year were actually out of this budget as well, so just I failed to acknowledge that when I spoke. But there will always, as I mentioned, there will always be more work to do, you know, in that space as well, and we'll look, of course, in future budgets to be able to make further changes as well.
Fair question, though, looking for systemic change as well as the policies that were introduced. One more question, that we've got more time for questions as we go through the morning as well, but one more question.
Julie Patton, Multicultural New Zealand. The budget does well in looking after the welfare of people. However, the people who are in the high echelon, particularly the prescriptions and some of the other ones, are getting it straight as well. And some of the comments I've heard are, how come the people who are more well off are able to pick up the things like prescriptions and other things which are not mean tested? Therefore, the distribution doesn't seem to be fair enough. They aren't helping the ones who are at the lower end, as well as the government helping them.
If I understood that correctly, your question was about why the co-payment prescription policy was not more targeted and it's universal instead. I've got to admit I don't know the answer to that specifically. I'll have to check in with MOF around that, but what I will say is many of the other changes or the initiatives that have been introduced or announced through Budget 23 are targeted. This particular one, sometimes the difference between targeted payments and universal payments, the cost of targeting outweighs the benefits. And that's what I've seen in previous initiatives over the years. I'll have to check whether that holds true for this one in particular, but I will do that. Thank you.
Actually, that's an interesting question because I think if you look at the fact in New Zealand that we have relatively low levels of elder poverty, and it's because it's a universal benefit. Well, it's not a benefit, it's a universal right. Why don't we do that for children? I think if we end the questions here, we will have time for more questions during the morning, but please put your hands together to thank the Minister for his speech. And we will dig into the budget and hold it to account with our fantastic panel here. And I want to start with Murray Edridge, who has come up with the most inspirational campaign for fundraising this year, Murray. It was, of course, an event that didn't happen, that no one went to, that raised lots of money, Silent Night. It was absolutely inspired. And so is Murray in his role as Wellington City Missioner now since 2018, recently ordained as well. One of the most important and leading lights in the Wellington region, and does incredible work. And as the Minister said, I'm sure, Murray, that you've been deeply involved with the aftermath of the tragic fire. So I'm very pleased to invite Murray to the stage to give us a few comments.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā te mihi ati ki tātou e hui mai nei. Yoku rangatira ina hui wha ki te mihi ki koutou. No mai hari mai. Good morning, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this occasion. And looking around this room, there are people in this room who I admire deeply who are doing extraordinary things, so thank you for what you do. A significant part of my role as Wellington City Missioner is to give those who have resources, those who make decisions, those who create policy, those who build budgets, a view of what life looks like from those at the bottom, from those who are doing life tough. This week, that story didn't need to be told by me. It got told by what happened at Loafers Lodge. And if you haven't been impacted by what happened in Newtown on Monday night, then you haven't been paying attention. And I'm not talking about a building, I'm not talking about emergency services. I'm talking about lives that got impacted. And I'm talking about the situation they were in before it happened. There's an American theologian called Jim Wallace who says, sometimes it takes a natural disaster to reveal a social disaster. I've sat with people this week who didn't have anything, but they've lost the little they had. And we can fix some things really easily. Every one of those people has been in housing this week. Every one of those people has been fed, has a new cell phone, and have their immediate needs cared for. But the trauma and the impact of the fire on Monday night is going to last for a very long time. I hope the impact lasts for a very long time because we have to pay attention to the fact that we had people living in substandard conditions. And the sad thing is, I think we all knew about it. And yet what did we do? What are we going to do as a consequence? The government promised us a cost of living relief budget. The subtitle was Support for Today, Building for Tomorrow. So did they do that? Here are my thoughts. I was delighted, and delighted is a big term, I was delighted that they removed the charge on prescriptions, because I know that will make a difference for the families we serve. I was delighted that they extended free ECE 20 hours to 2-year-olds, because that will make a huge difference for the families we serve. I was pleased that we've got continuing subsidised and some free public transport. I was pleased that we're going to have some warmer, more energy efficient homes. And I'm pleased that we're going to build 1,000 more social houses each year for the next 3 years. But for me, there's an elephant in the room that we haven't talked about yet, and that is the cost of housing now. And we've all reflected in recent days about the increased cost of food and groceries, the cost of living, the challenges they create. And they're real, those challenges. For me, though, the significance of them is overwhelmed by the fact that households are not surviving at the moment because of the cost of housing. And maybe I just didn't see it, I haven't found anything in this budget that addresses that now. Obviously, over time, this is about stock. This is about quantity of housing. But that's too far away. So what do we do in the meantime? Everyone that comes in my door has a housing issue. It's accessibility to housing, it's quality of housing, it's affordability of housing. I got asked numerous times this week by the media to comment on the condition of Loafers Lodge. I wasn't prepared to do that because it opens all sorts of doors you don't want to go into. What I did say is Loafers Lodge is the place you live where you don't have any viable alternative. So I wonder, how are we going to respond to this? Almost every shopper in my social supermarket doesn't have a food problem, they have a housing problem. They have an adequacy of household income problem that is driven by the cost of housing. The Karahiakai organisation, and we've got Jenny and Trish and Sonia here today, and they produce what I think is a remarkable report called Kamakona, and if you haven't seen it, you should read it. The latest edition of that report was published in September, October last year. And what it says is that Wellington is the most unaffordable place in the country to live. And it takes this particular report 3 household scenarios and looks at each of those households, if they were earning a benefit, or if they're earning a minimum wage, or the median wage. And it looks at those different scenarios, and frankly, unless you were earning the median wage or above, you're just not going to survive. So this isn't a future problem, this is a current disaster. I want to commend the government for what they did yesterday, because I think the initiatives that have been introduced are great, and thank you for that. But we've got work to do. Father Greg Boyle, in his latest book, describes the COVID situation and says this: we all faced the same COVID storm, but some of us were in ocean liners, and some of us were in inner tubes, and some of us were hanging on to pieces of driftwood. And I think that's the reality. For most of us, we've weathered okay the COVID storm. For those in our community who don't have much, who don't have anything, they've struggled, and they've struggled more. And we've got a housing system that's under pressure in the city, we know that. And all of a sudden, we've got a number of people now who used to be accommodated, albeit very poorly, who are now part of that system. And so it gets harder, it gets worse, it gets more expensive. So today, as we think about this budget, let's acknowledge and celebrate the things that are good, and let's be aware that we've got some work still to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Murray. And you remind us of the importance of housing as the core issue around any discussion around poverty. Just so you know, we're going to have 2 more speakers, then some quick time for questions, and also after the final speakers, we will have a panel, so we'll really get to dig into some of this. And also, speakers, I'll skulk around. If you go over time, I'll are just passive-aggressively emerge in your peripheral vision. I'm very happy now to introduce someone who will be familiar to many of you, Professor Jonathan Boston. Jonathan is, of course, Professor of Policy Studies at Victoria University, Director of the Institute of Governance and Policy Studies, formerly, I think? Formerly, yes, and formerly Treasury, even. And Jonathan, to me, is one of those people, when I think of politicians, I'm always complaining about the professional politician, the sort of emergence of the profession of politics, which has sandpapered some of the moral mission and crusade of politics, I think. And so there's the professional politician and the conviction politician, the politicians that get things done. I think Jonathan Boston is not so much a professional academic as a conviction academic, and he gets things done and makes a difference. He has had a profound influence on our ability to understand the causes of poverty, child poverty, and what to do about it. So I'm extremely pleased to invite Jonathan Boston to say a few words to you today.
Well, morena, everyone. Ko Jonathan Boston aho. It's very hard to speak after some sort of introduction like that, isn't it? I wish I had had a bit more impact on some things, but we keep trying. So, first of all, just to build on what Murray has said, like many of you here today, I and my wife were deeply shocked by what has happened at Loafers Lodge, just down the road from where we live a few days ago. I know at least one of the people who died. I think he was a student of mine some years ago, and obviously it's an absolutely tragic situation. And a key point is that we have tolerated in this country far too long poor standards of housing, as Murray has said, including poor standards of safety. And we just have to demand higher standards of health and safety, not least for our most vulnerable citizens. This is a kind of Grenfell moment for Wellington. Grenfell Tower, as many of you know, burnt some years ago with the death of 72 people. Well, we don't yet know how many will have died in the last few days, but it's a scar on this society, and we need to do something about it. Now, as I'm sure many of you would agree with, there are some excellent things in the budget, not least the scrapping of the $5 co-payment for prescriptions, the extending of the 20-hour free early childhood education subsidies to 2-year-olds, free public transport for children, and high half-price discounts for those aged 13 to 24. And as someone who teaches young people in a university, I'm delighted particularly about that last one, the half-price discounts. And there are lots of other good things in the budget. But obviously, Grant Robertson was faced with some very significant challenges in putting this budget together, as the Minister outlined earlier, and I won't bore you with those because you know. So let me just concentrate on 3 or 4 things very quickly. The first is this: it's really good that we have in our Public Finance Act a requirement for the government to produce a child poverty report in every budget, and that report outlines what is happening in terms of rates of child poverty and what impact the budget is expected to have on child poverty. And I think that's a terrific step forward because it increases accountability and transparency. And what it highlights is that this budget will have a modest effect on at least one of the primary measures of poverty, but in all likelihood, another measure of poverty will probably go up over the next few years without further policy changes, and that's disappointing. We don't know exactly what the impact will be on material hardship for children, but what we do know, and Murray knows a lot more about this than I, is we have some very significant material hardship in this country and here in Wellington. So although there have been improvements on the basis of all the primary and supplementary measures, or most of them, over the last 3 or 4 years as a result of the government's policy changes, which I commend, although there has been some improvement in poverty rates for children, for families, a lot more needs to be done. And in that regard, it seems to me that we need to move, frankly, beyond just a focus on children or family poverty and think about other groups in particular 18 to 24-year-olds, where poverty rates went up very, very significantly in the 90s and have remained quite high ever since. So one of my policy proposals would be that we extend the requirement for government to set targets for child poverty to other other age groups over the coming years. In addition, and this is really important for children looking forward, is that we not only have a requirement for the government to produce a report on the impact of the budget on child poverty, but also a requirement for the government to produce a report of the impact of the budget on environmental outcomes, including the key kind of environmental outcomes, such as greenhouse gas emissions, freshwater quality, biodiversity, and so forth. So in a nutshell, what I'm saying is we need much greater specificity, accountability, and transparency. Next point is that while it's great that the current government is committed to a more inclusive, resilient, sustainable, and prosperous society and economy, in my view, and I think others would share this, we need greater ambition and more urgency, as Murray has indicated, and a broader range of goals. And in my view, just very quickly, in addition to be concerned about poverty, we need a very specific objective of reducing income and wealth inequality, and especially ethnic inequality in terms of income and wealth. And to be specific, we need to target particular measures of income and wealth inequality, such as the Gini coefficient for income and for wealth. And we need to set, in my view, societal targets for reducing the levels of inequality in those respects. And I appreciate, partly, I don't think any country has done this, but it's about time we did, because we've had a very significant increase in inequality, or at least we did several decades ago, and that has remained the case. Next point is we need to set some very ambitious goals for housing, as Murray has indicated. And in my view, that means, amongst other things, a goal of at least doubling the size of our current social housing stock, which is now only about 4% of total housing stock in the country. We need to get back to where we were 40 years ago, when it was 7%, if not higher. And in my view, unless we do that, and a lot of other things about which Charles knows more than I, a lot more, we are not going to address the kind of housing challenges we have. We also, in my view, need to be ambitious about returning to higher rates of home ownership in general, but also particularly for Māori and Pacifica. Bear in mind, in this country, most Māori and Pacifica rent accommodation, and an awful lot of them rent from Pākehā. I just don't think that should be accepted. So we should set ambitious targets for increasing home ownership rates. Finally, and I'll finish now, Josie, how do we achieve these sorts of things? Well, with difficulty, no question. The policy changes required to reduce inequality, address the housing challenges we have, reduce poverty further, they will require significant policy shifts. Things like a more progressive income tax, a comprehensive capital gains tax or a land tax, significantly higher carbon prices with a just transition with significant changes in tax sort of welfare arrangements, including working for families, which was mentioned earlier. And selling those policies, I appreciate, is challenging, but we need to do the selling. So I'll leave you there, all right? Cheers.
Yes, politics is about persuasion and having the courage to do it, I think. A theme is emerging here, isn't it, of housing, and sometimes these problems can seem so complicated and also so simple. A big social housing project would make a huge difference. And on that note, I'm very pleased to invite Huhana Linden, who is the Raukura, the CEO of Ngāti Wai Trust Board. Huhana has had a career in both education and public health, and then back to education, and of course a leader for her iwi. And In fact, we were just talking about the importance of housing and the barriers that get put up to doing simple things like just building. Huhana, very happy to invite you to the stage and to give a few comments on the budget. Thank you. Please put your hands together for Huhana.
Morena tātou katoa. E mihi ana kia koe whaia Jean mo tō krakia, kia tīmata tō tātou kaupapa. O ti rā ka mihi ki ngā mana whenua o tēnei rohe o tātou, te whanganui ātara, Ngāti Toa Rangatira te Aotearoa Taranaki Whānui, tēnei rā he mokopuna o Toa Rangatira e mihi atu nei kia koutou. Ki ngā mema pāremata, Ibrahim, tō tātou Minita, Priyanka, Auntie Louise, ngā mihi. Kia tātou katoa, tēnā koutou, kia ora anō tātou. My name's Huhana Linden. I'm 45 years old today. And I'm a single mother of 3 daughters, and I'm tangata whenua, but I'm a statistic. And my journey's not too dissimilar to many Māori here in Aotearoa. It's about overcoming significant challenges, personally and professionally, coming from rural Taitokero and doing good. But it's an honour and a privilege to serve our people as CEO of Ngāti Wai Trust Board. Our vision for Tiwi o Ngāti Wai is kia korikore ngā totorore o Manaia Tūrangarau, to strengthen the well-being of and prosperity for the people of Ngāti Wai. Because we're a people of land and sea. As an iwi, we've got strategic goals that seek to support our people to thrive. Pau rangatiratanga, self-determination. Pau tangata, intergenerational well-being. Pau mātauranga, education and learning. Pau taiao, healthy environments. Pau tahua, economic well-being. Now, all of these pau reflect the aspirations of our iwi. And through this lens, I can see that this budget contributes to elements of our iwi pau, but not in its entirety. Today's economic conditions are pitched as something that are out there in the environment, something external to ourselves. But our economy is driven by people and policy. This budget contributes to the economic settings of our country, who succeeds and who fails. We're halfway through the 10-year journey of addressing child poverty through our Labour-led government. So let's reflect on some of those achievements and what the budget says to us today. So as Māori, we've heard and we know and we feel that we are the bottom of every statistic here in Aotearoa. We are the long trail of inequality. And this budget has a narrow focus. And for those of us with tamariki, there's a win for sure. But there's still a long way to go to addressing inequalities, the cost of living for many of our society here in Aotearoa, New Zealand. I think about the Māori budget of 2023, which focuses on whānau, whakapapa and whare. We had $1 billion Māori budget last year, and we've got a reduction this year to $825 million. Next week, when the Māori MPs, the Māori caucus, come to Taitokero, I'll be front row again to celebrate the wins, but also to ask further questions around where's our next steps. The investment into Māori education is a win. It's been neglected over a number of generations, and we need to see Māori medium education lifted up. The $200 million for Whai Kāinga Whai Oranga is definitely a support to what already exists in whenua Māori. But the building and repairing of kāinga Māori, and I'm thinking whenua Māori, a lot of people don't understand those remnant parts of whenua Māori are things that we have inherited through generations. We are not seeking to lose that whenua, and in fact, many of us have real challenges in infrastructure. I can name 50-odd families who don't have a road, don't have drinking water or a septic tank right now, living on whenua Māori in Northland. So these are just basic human rights to be able to exist on your ancestral lands and have basic things like a road, a septic tank and access to drinking water. Whānau Water having $168 million, again, to help resource the sector is really important, but we also have to be mindful that many of us access mainstream health services. So from last year's budget where I spoke, we were online last year and we had the Associate Minister of Health, Penny Henare, with us. The Paiora legislation and the changes being made within Whatuora and Te Aka Whaiora are a move in the right direction. And as Tiwi Māori, we watch and wait with anticipation because we see it as an entire system, the way with which we can influence the budget and the investment into improving Māori health outcomes. Now in the Māori budget for this year, there's 132 million set aside for Māori health, data management, workforce development and rongoa Māori investment. Let's see what the detail looks like, to be fair. Reflecting on the $5 charges that will be wiped for prescriptions, I think that was the headliner for the budget. And it helps many, absolutely. A barrier to access to those important rongoa that we need from time to time. As a mother of 3 teenage daughters, I was fortunate to benefit from the 20 hours free when it was first implemented, and I know that many of us are working poor and early childhood education costs way too much. So having the extension of 20 hours free for our babies, those 2-year-olds, will be a massive step in the right direction. But the access to early childhood education should be a right for all mokopuna, no matter where you come from, and across the regions as well. Rural Northland has very little access. You have to drive to town. Considering public transport, and I'm here in Wellington, ex-Victoria University. I love Wellington. My teenage daughters are here. Toi whakaari, yay, all of that. Public transport here is amazing. You can get on a bus, a train, a cable car every 5 minutes. In Tai Tokerau, that's not a reality. So while there is free public transport for under 12s and also half-price public transport for under 25-year-olds, which is a win for urban settings, in Whangarei you're lucky to get a bus once an hour. If you live in Kaikohe, you need a car. We don't have access to the public transport that actually we really need to help connect our towns to cities, to work, and to that infrastructure that rests and sits within places like Kirikiri, also Whangarei, Kaikohe. We need a bigger envelope to enable the required investment we need to support reducing inequalities in Aotearoa. Inflation versus investment. Will there be funding cuts into the future on core infrastructure and core services? I guess that's one of the questions from yesterday's budget. In summary, and I'm doing a short version, Auntie, our economy is not like the weather. It's set by those in power. Tai Tokerau, we are the Māori rural minority. Most of our whanaunga live in town. We lack many of the core services that we take for granted in urban centres. We are the working poor. We have extreme housing needs. With critical infrastructure failures we saw within our district, and as I've shared, many of our kāinga Māori have a lack of infrastructure in their daily lives. The cyclones and extreme weather events have highlighted what we miss in terms of investment into Te Tai Tokerau. This budget is a work in progress, it's a contribution, but it's not our silver bullet. We need to address inequalities for our babies and for Tiwi Māori. Ko tai ki te wā, ko eke te wā. Now is the time for change. And I think that that's the pātai that I'm asking. What are our next steps? Where is the systemic change and the investment that we need for sustainable, enduring solutions for our people? Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora tātou katoa.
Kia ora Huhana and Hari Huru Tau. And also I want to acknowledge that while people like you and Murray are fighting for the working poor, for the regions, you're also dealing with your own personal lives, but tragedies within your communities. And you have dealt, I know, Huhana, you've been tautoking your community during the Abbey Caves tragedy a few weeks ago, which was heartbreaking to everybody. And we lost a teenager there, Kanan Ahorangi Pitera. So it's tough fighting for these changes and also dealing with the tragedies that happen in our communities along the way. Look, we've got time for one question, and then we're going to go to the final three speakers, then a panel. But if I can take one question for anyone on the panel who's spoken already, please. Sir, in the background.
Kia ora, Richard Randerson, former vicar here. To anyone on the panel, just linking two things, the question of targeting, which was raised earlier, and the cost of food. I just wonder if there's some way in which, e.g., people on a community service card could have the card loaded each week with a sum of money, which they could then use to offset essential items in food at the supermarket.
Does anyone want to answer that on the panel? Yep, Huhana.
Well, you've already offered the solution. It's quite common sense. We need to see a reduction and a support for those, particularly with community services cards. You know, the budget had an opportunity to look at the way with which we could increase access to those essential items in Kai. Even taking GST off food for those with a community services card. I'm not saying a bottle of Coke and chocolate, but those food items that are essential for whānau to keep going. But it never happened, unfortunately. You know, I think that's where the wider questions need to be asked in terms of what are some tangible things for everyday New Zealanders that we can see benefit for. And you've used the community services card as a simple solution if there was going to be a serious investment.
Yes, please. Yep.
Sorry, just very briefly, I wish we didn't have community services cards, frankly. I'd much prefer to have a situation in which there was adequate income for people and that we didn't have this kind of division between people with cards and people without cards. And I wouldn't want to intensify the use of such mechanisms, Richard. I'd much prefer we went to a more universal, all-in together approach. Happy to say more about that another time.
Yeah, I think we can get into that in the panel too, because I always think lifting the GST off fruit and veg, everyone says it's hard. Why is it hard? I can identify fruit and veg. I'd like to invite for our next speaker, Charles Waldegrave, who will be known to many of you. Charles is, of course, at the Family Centre, which is a leading cultural and social policy research centre, but also, of course, does family therapy services, and in a way that is quite innovative and has really changed the way in which therapy services and community services are delivered. Charles was, of course, the co-lead of the New Zealand Poverty Measurement Project, which has provided the kind of evidence we need to look at public policy and debate it and work out what works and what doesn't. So I'm very pleased to invite Charles Waldegrave from the Family Centre to say a few words about the budget.
Kei te whakamoimiti ki te atua, mō nā manakitanga me nā āwhina ki a mātou. Nā rangatira mā, a tēnā koutou, mihi nui, mihi aroha ki a koutou. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, kia ora koutou katoa. E whaatolo whaatu I le pāia, lasi lasi ua whaatasi mai. Greetings to everyone this morning, and thank you to the speakers so far that have offered a lot of different insights into this budget. So in trying to analyse this budget, these are some of the things that I came up with. They chose not to lift beneficiary incomes. They didn't increase, as Nikki has pointed out, working for family tax credits. They didn't add to incomes because they thought all these aspects would be inflationary. So the investment was not directly in incomes. The investment is much more in services. So they invested in early childhood education, the prescription, removing the cost of prescriptions, as we've all heard, in public transport, and in energy retrofits. These are the big things. So the approach was, in terms of addressing the cost of living, the approach was to reduce essential the cost of certain essential services and expand household budgets that way, rather than providing direct income. This was to increase the capacity of the current incomes that people have by reducing costs of selected services and certain essential services. So that seems to me the frame that they use. So the question we need to ask is, will it end poverty? Well, no, of course it won't. Will it ease the burden of poor households? Yes, it will to a certain extent. Certainly those 4 critical measures that have been well spoken of this morning will make a difference. But it's focused on households with children primarily. Will the child statistics, which Jonathan referred to, will they reduce as a result of that? Well, you have to balance that. I mean, they should reduce it to some extent, but you have to balance that with this ever-increasing housing costs that have been talked about. And that is where there is the major problem. And however much it does reduce or hold it the same, there is always more people in poverty because we're not getting to the bottom end of that particular problem. Now, one of the things that I felt has been important is to try and dig into the budget a bit on things that haven't been mentioned so much on the media. And I think there are 2 high points and 1 very low point that hasn't been mentioned. The first high point, Huhana actually referred to it, and that is the 200 million for Kāinga Whai Oranga. This is a housing investment on top of budget 2021, which comes to almost $1 billion in Māori housing. And it's very much hands-off in terms of government. It's an investment throughout the country to various iwi and various Māori groups who then can develop the housing continuum from ownership to renting to emergency housing and so on. I think that is very significant that it wasn't just a one-off in budget 2021, but that they're showing there's an ongoing investment there. The second thing that I think is a high point that hasn't come out in the media, and it's very relevant to the minister we had here, Radhakrishnan, is 863 million invested in disability services. These are some of the most vulnerable people in our community, and that is a very large amount of money in a budget like this. 800. It's moving towards $1 billion. They set up a new ministry for disabled people with the appropriate name Whai Kaha, and they're investing in bespoke services, transport services for those that can't get public services, and also they've removed they've put an end to the discriminatory process whereby disabled people could be paid below the minimum wage. That has been removed. However, there's a major low point, and that is the lack of investment in Pacific peoples. If you look at the amount of money that they've put towards Pacific peoples, it adds up to 46 million. And I was looking at it, I think the investment in a whole range of Māori aspects have been fantastic. If you take, for example, Māori media alone, there's an investment of 51 million. For Pacific people in all the investments, that is language, resilience, employment, business, it sums to 46 million. This group in the community is being forgotten, and it really needs to be addressed in the future. And there's no special housing focus in all of that. So, where do we land in all of this? The context is they're trying to bring out a budget in a context of inflation. So inflation has started to come down. In the December quarter, it was 7.2, and it's come down in the March quarter to 6.7. So they don't want to upset that. Treasury is no longer forecasting a recession. so they don't want to upset that. There have been these disastrous floods. That's the other part of the context. In Auckland up north and, of course, the East Coast. So there's a massive investment that those of us that are really concerned about the social side need to appreciate this massive investment in infrastructure. 71 billion, which is 12.5 billion each year for 5 years. And on top of that, there's the whole focus on rebuilding skills, 300 million, rebuilding schools, and a capital investment to enhance the recovery. The other thing to notice is that many of these initiatives relate to climate change. So the public transport, the energy retrofits for housing, and the infrastructure funds. So they've tried to work out the balance as they see it. Will it help everyone? No, it won't. Will it help the people, like the people that live at Loafers or did live at Loafers Lodge? It's not going to help them much. It's geared more towards households with children. It's a contribution, but it's not ambitious, and certainly not ambitious in housing. And it's that balance that we want in the future. Thank you.
A contribution, but not ambitious. I think that sums it up very well, Charles. And isn't it interesting that the Minister for Pacific Peoples doesn't sit in Cabinet, around the Cabinet table? That would be one easy thing to change. I'd now like to introduce Louise Delaney, who is, of course, the Tax Justice Aotearoa. Louise is also a public health lawyer, an academic, senior lecturer at Otago still, yes, and has worked in the health sector for much of her working life, has many insights, and pleased to have your comments on the budget. Louise, thank you. Welcome.
Kia ora tātou. My name is Louise Delaney. First of all, I just want to thank the organisers for inviting me. I very much welcome the ability to talk on tax. I would also like to thank the speakers who have already spoken before me, and really to thank them very, very much. I really appreciate their many ideas and principles that they've shared with us. I have to say, though, of course, that Murray's reminder of Wellington, New Zealand's Grenfell moment, Loafers Lodge, has the one problem of, making us want to cry, which is not the right time to do that right this very moment. Okay, so I'm from Tax Justice Aotearoa, and I want to just begin with saying why invite me here, and that's because it's quite simple. We certainly believe in Tax Justice, our organisation, that tax reform, both in how we get money, how much we get money, and from whom we get money, is the answer to many of the issues that we've talked about today. So, Tax Justice, right, thanks. I won't go on about this in detail. It's a values that we share a lot, I think, but very specifically as a united focus, our group wants a world where we have fair tax policies that produce enough tax revenue to both reduce inequalities and of course, poverty, and particular child poverty. We want also more funding for public services, and to do that, basically, money is essential. Funding for services needs money, which means needs a different tax system. I'll just mention our tax system at the moment relies on two main streams. One is income from wages and benefits, to some extent, and secondly, consumption tax, GST. Every time you go to the supermarket, you pay a tax. So what our tax system doesn't tax is major. In particular, no wealth, with very minor exceptions, is taxed, and capital gains is not, of course, taxed. Now that is a major gap in our present system, a source of wealth which we have not tapped. The effective rate paid by New Zealand's richest people is just 8.9%, whereas ordinary people can pay 22% of their income for for somebody earning $80,000 a year. So that just kind of shows how much revenue we could get if we had a wealth system, with a system which a bit more focus on wealth. Our tax system does not have to be like this. Like a previous speaker said, systems can be changed. Last week, around 100, quote, financially comfortable people in an open letter wrote that tax was a shared contribution to the collective success of New Zealand, such as it is. Tax is one way we can build a better world. We are ready to pay our fair share. Nearly half the country's wealthiest people pay a lower tax rate than medium tax workers. And many people supported that open letter when it came out. It supported specifically some kind of wealth tax. There are various kinds of wealth taxes, so we're not just talking about one in particular. Now, I'm not going to go over, but just briefly show this, which is a bit of a summary of what other people have said, what's in the budget today. A bit too small to read, really. But, as people have said, there are some positive steps, and we welcome those. Certainly, great emphasis on ECE. The co-payment obviously is an issue that people, a positive thing that people have mentioned. Free school lunches, that's been continued. Public transport, as identified. And of course housing, including Māori housing, retrofitting, all that kind of thing. They're good steps, and we're not gainsaying that. But there's a heck of a lot which is not in the budget. Action around working for families, that's for sure. Estimates for child poverty targets say they may decrease a little bit this year, but next year we expect to see them on the increase again. And at the present rate, our child poverty targets will not be met. As a tax working group, we are, of course, interested in fundamentally in what the budget had for tax-related moves. Basically, nothing fundamental. There's one little whisper of a change, that is an increase in the rate of trustees, which are a major source in which richer people, more well-off people, can park their money while they think about what they're going to do next. That has changed, and that's good. It will promote fairness to some extent, but it is a tiny drop in the bucket of possible wealth revenue. Okay, so my little quick summing up of the budget impact, many people have mentioned this. The cyclone recovery is absolutely essential, of course, but there is very little, apart from information on data, about the funding for long-term climate change policy. How could the budget have addressed inequity and so on, reduced poverty? Our tax system needs a greater focus on wealth. A capital gains tax, where I'm not mentioning any particular preferences here, there are options: capital gains, wealth tax, inheritance tax. What is next for us as ordinary people? We must make tax an election issue. The scale and breadth of challenges covered in today's budget, yesterday's, demand urgency, and they depend on better taxes, not less taxes. We can't end child poverty without better tax. So, we have formed a coalition. This is where the advertisement is. Us, Tax Justice and Oxfam, and have formed a coalition with many participating organisations. This campaign kicks off in a couple of weeks' time. It will be launched formally in a few weeks with ideas to people who wish to participate in that, and you can learn about this, the Fair Tax campaign, from our website, or come and ask me when that properly gets going. It's aimed towards the election. So in one way, we are not that concerned, we're not going to focus right now on yesterday's budget. We are looking forward to an election and ways we can influence those in power to think about tax as a way to reduce the many inequalities that our previous speakers have talked about and reduce poverty. So I invite you to go and find out more where we stand on this issue from our Tax Justice website. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Kia ora, Louise. And isn't it interesting, we're talking about tax, and I think all the politicians have left. We have a final speaker today, and then we're going to get into the panel. Now, before we do that, we're going to lose Jonathan, I think, quite shortly, because Jonathan's got to teach, which is his day job. So I thought, just before we get to you, Lisa, because we're going to lose Jonathan. Yes, but one question I want to ask you, Jonathan, before you go, is how do you persuade people who, because we're all furiously just agreeing here in this church, how do you persuade people who don't agree that the tax system needs to change or systemic changes need to happen? How do you persuade people who don't agree with you? Because that's the only way we're going to get that change.
Well, Josie, with difficulty. But one has to argue the case. One has to argue it on the basis of sound principle and good evidence. So, for example, if you just take a more progressive tax system, Australia, United Kingdom, Germany have a top tax rate of 45 cents in the dollar, or 45p in the case of the UK. Well, you know, they're not doing too badly. Australia seems to be doing better than we are. Presumably, you know, Australian high-income earners don't all flee to the United States. So, anyway, we have to argue the case in a principled way, calmly drawing on the best available evidence. And I appreciate, you know, we haven't done that well over the last 30 or 40 years. So we've got a long way to go. I'm sorry, I have to go and teach.
Yes, thank you, Jonathan. And I think the importance of evidence, isn't it? The importance of facts and evidence and data is critical in that. So finally, to wrap it all up for the speakers, we have Lisa Timorenga, who is, of course, a health specialist who specialises in nutrition. We were just talking about food and whether you put on a community services card or lift the GST off fruit and veg or something. So I'm really looking forward to hearing what Lisa has to say. Of course, Lisa specialises in Māori health in particular, a researcher based at Massey University, but nutrition in general. And if there's nothing, we're talking about housing. Food is the other critical factor when it comes to dealing with poverty. So, Lisa, thank you.
Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi nui, ki ngā mana whenua, ki ngā whānau o tēnei whare tapu, ki ngā rangatira I tēnei whare as well. Ngā mihi also to the people on the screen. Hopefully they'll be watching. I feel a little bit trumped in what I have to say after Murray's very impassioned talk this morning about the cost of housing, because at Health Coalition Aotearoa and in our work we know that healthy food is a privilege for people that comes after they have paid their rent, paid their power, and all those other necessities. So unfortunately, encouraging or helping our population to eat the sort of healthy food that we know is going to sustain our population in good health, reduce expenditure on the health system, allow our children to grow and develop, is not a priority for many, many families right now. I have to put my glasses on. Kind of a ramble today. In preparing for this talk, because it was a very busy day, and I also want to say happy birthday to Huhana. I was 51 yesterday, so budget day was my birthday in Auckland. But in preparing, I read the news this morning, and the first story I read was a story about Kaitaia Mama Chantal Puru, who was really proud to be able to feed her whānau of 5 on about $100 a week. Sometimes if things go wrong, she might only have $20 a week left to buy food, but she was really proud to say she didn't rely on people, she didn't need the food banks, that she could make that money spend. And she gave and she gave an example of being able to feed her family meatball subs when the breadsticks were down to $1. She could cut a French stick into 4 pieces, put on a little bit of mince and a little bit of budget tomato sauce and a scraping of cheese. A starvation diet. The University of Otago food cost survey, they estimate the costs of diets that will meet the needs, the nutritional needs of families and individuals. Their survey for the most basic diet that has all of the nutrients, proteins, vitamins, minerals that we recommend that people eat to stave off chronic diseases and infections and to grow well, costs a family $273 a week. So she's making do on $100 a week. And all of these things that are quite positive in the budget that have been announced, I don't think they're going to add up to $173 shortfall that she's missing out on being able to feed her family right now. So at Health Coalition Aotearoa, we're not excited by the budget. We're not disappointed. You know, the things are, I suppose we are a little bit disappointed, aren't we all here disappointed? Everyone's disappointed. There's so much more we would like. But we're not doing enough for our families right now. Having said that, that $5 prescription fee that I heard some political parties saying they're going to roll back if they get into power, that they don't think is fair, that will make a huge difference. If you've only got $100 for food, then you can imagine when Chantal needs to go down to the doctors to get her kids some paracetamol because they've got an infection, that that might be an even worse meal that she's left feeding those her kids, and they're going to get sicker and sicker. Cost us all much more money. One of the things that we were really looking for in Health Coalition Aotearoa was we were pushing for an expansion of the Ka Ora Ka Ako Healthy School Lunch Program. So currently about 25% of kids, so the bottom 25% of schools in terms of socioeconomic indicators, get the free lunch. But we know from the Growing Up in New Zealand survey that at least 10% of kids at schools who are not getting that free lunch program are living in severe to moderate food insecurity. So they'll be living in households that are getting food like Chantal's able to feed her family, keeps the tummy full, but it's not protecting their long-term health, well-being, growth and development. So we were asking that if there was one thing the government could do right now that would take some of the pressure off families who are struggling to feed their families, could they look at expanding the program to reach more of those kids? That hasn't happened, but we are pleased to see that they've extended it for longer than they had proposed. So it hasn't been taken away, so that is at least a win. And we know from some of the mamas that we've talked to, if you've got 3 kids who are getting free lunches at school, that can make about $60 difference a week to their food budget. So Chantal will be able to buy a little bit better food for her family with that school lunch program. It's not perfect, and I know some of you have asked about targeting. Not all kids in the schools that get free lunches need them, so why should we do that? Well, actually, we think a bit more holistically like that. We don't want to target kids and stigmatise them. We know from overseas programs that when you target just the poorest kids to get those programs, the uptake is worse. Because, you know, it's shameful to have to receive a handout when someone else isn't. Also, the benefits of free lunches extend to all kids, because most of our kids in New Zealand are not really eating the diets that are optimal for good growth and development, and we want those kids to grow up as healthy, productive people who can pay our superannuation, don't we? So we don't want them their working lives cut short because they're unwell from preventable diseases caused by not learning and being able to have access to healthy, nutritious food. So just from a purely selfish point of view, Jonathan's gone, you know, we could just say, look, feeding all of our kids is good for all of us in the world. I just wanted to talk about the GST before I go, because So this is kind of answering a question now. Taking GST off fruits and vegetables. This is actually something that nutrition experts often ask for, and it's not something I really favour because I kind of think of taking the GST off fruits and vegetables as a tax cut for the rich. I buy lots of fruits and vegetables. So, you know, we'd be losing tax revenue. I don't think Chantal here can afford very much fruits and vegetables anyway. She's not buying them. She's not going to get a benefit from taking that GST off fruits and vegetables. So I think that money could be better targeted to support families like Chantal's. And, you know, I'd rather the capital gains tax, take the money off the people who can afford it the most. We seem to expect our poorest families to do all the sacrifices right now and make really terrible sacrifices. So I'd like to see a much more progressive budget in the future. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Lisa. Oh no, I've got to rethink my position on GST off fruit and veg now. Thanks, Lisa. And actually, I left New Zealand when I was 4, grew up in England, and went to a state school. We had school dinners every day. Shepherd's pie, spotty dick pudding. Some of it was terrible, but God, we ate well. We ate really well. And that's one simple thing, it seems to me, that we could do in New Zealand. When I came back to New Zealand in my 20s, I couldn't believe that kids didn't have free school dinners or subsidised school dinners, cooked dinners. So look, we're nearly at the end. Let's have a couple of questions for the panel. I've got one question. I think let's take one from the audience. I know you guys have got to get to work, but it's been a fantastic discussion, and we're very polite, aren't we, us Kiwis? I think, you know, we're happy that this budget has made a contribution. We're very aware, very specific about where the contribution is, but once again, we do not have the systemic change that we want. So one question from the audience here. Thank you.
Kia ora koutou, I'm Paul. It's a finance question. We're allowed to talk about money around the budget. So sometimes I think it's probably you, Charles, or maybe you, Murray. We're tinkering around the edges a little with this budget. Hana, I just totally agree with you. This was a man-made problem. Most of the problem that we're now tinkering around the edges of was through the massive quantitative easing that occurred during COVID, which was just without direction given to the banks, and given they have 60% of all their business in residential mortgages, what on earth did the people at Treasury and Reserve Bank think they were going to do with all of that money except pump up our house market? So we're kind of dealing with the problems that our own people have created. So could you comment on what sort of, now that we've got a baseline, we've just started to invest in housing the last 5 years after 40 years of absolute neglect, how do we maintain that baseline and continue to build on it, regardless of the colour or of the multi-headed beast we're about to elect?
Murray or Charles? Yeah, Charles. Yep.
Are we on? Yep. I think it's a really important question. The budget, when you talk about ambition, I mean, there is ambition in infrastructure, there is ambition in other areas, and that will include housing. But we're not really addressing, as has been said by numbers of speakers, the housing crisis adequately. There is very significant investment in Māori housing, which is great, and it's across the whole continuum. And that needs to build and go on for another decade, but we also need it across other groups in the society, and particularly Pacific people. I think the problem is, at the moment, is there is a sense with the government that if they get a roof over people's heads, they've solved the problem. But many of them are left in great insecurity. I mean, if you go into a state house now, you can get moved out once someone else is in greater need. It used to be a house for life. So it doesn't provide the security it used to. The rental market is now more expensive for most people than the mortgage market. And so we're not investing adequately in equity and wealth, which is to be able to, the way people in the post-war years were able to build an asset was through housing. And what we need is much more shared equity, rent to buy, and be investing at that end of the continuum alongside, I mean, obviously you need social housing. It's that lack of balance that's a real problem, and I think that needs to come to the fore much more.
Yep. Murray, do you want to say something?
We go on this one? Can you hear me? Okay. Paul, you ask the easy questions, don't you? Hey, look, this is a terribly difficult challenge. We've seen the cost of ownership of housing come down. I haven't seen the rental market move down at all. In fact, I suspect it's gone up. And so we need to be thinking about what is, and I'm the last one to want to talk about regulation normally, but we have private landlords who are not playing by the rules, I think, and that requires some intervention of some kind. And yeah, arguably the decisions that have been made by government in recent times that make private rental less attractive to investors need to be thought about. However, the National Party's announcement 2 weeks ago that they wanted to reintroduce no-cause eviction is not the way to do it. So we do need to think about fairness and equity and giving people a decent go.
Yep, go.
There are different housing products available now, and we know there's land for housing, there's progressive home ownership, there's a wide range, whai koanga, whai oranga. I'm an interim trustee on Te Pauahi o Te Taitokiro, which is one of the 4 Māori housing prototypes, 55 million coming into Taitokiro, but it's one-off. So the sustainability again, that's why it is good that we have further investment. But one of the challenges I think is the way that we can work, and I'm not saying I am saying public-private partnership, but how can we plan better across our regions, because we need more homes, 400 more homes tomorrow in Kaitaia for existing need, but we don't have the infrastructure in Kaitaia to handle Te Raroa's plans for a development. So while we have this massive need, we've got a lack of infrastructure, which I'm keen to see where the infrastructure dollar goes, because we can be a part of the solution if we have the building blocks of strong community, healthy environments before we put the homes on. So it's really chicken and egg at the moment. So for Taitokiro in particular, we want to see our people come home, and they are coming home, and they're working, but they're living in cars by public toilets right now, trying to afford to make ends meet. But infrastructure is a core issue within the regions.
And that's where you get to the urgency, isn't it? That if the problem is urgent, you're going to get creative about how to fund it. And it's often community organisations and people on the ground who are going, let's think about where the money's coming from. We haven't got a problem with public-private partnerships, just let's get the funding. Time for one more question from the audience. Yes, sir. Yeah, the back.
Obviously, yesterday's budget emphasises redistributive measures. But my question is just to test the basic assumption. Do we have a cost of living crisis, or are we just a poor nation that has actually, I think the poverty has now struck the middle class?
Both. Anyone like to answer that? I think we have both.
I don't think we're a poor nation at all. I think we're a small nation, and that has some market challenges and means that economies of scale don't exist, but I don't think we have an even distribution of the wealth that we have.
Can I ask you all very quickly, and this is the last point, to just say one thing that you would have liked to, realistically, that you would have liked to have seen in the budget that wasn't there. Louise? Shall I answer for you? Capital gains tax.
Does this work?
Yep.
I, from Tax Justice Aotearoa, from that point of view, would like to have seen even a promise of a more thoroughgoing tax policy that would draw on all kinds of wealth and distributed those evenly.
Yeah, good. Charles?
I would like to see the investment in housing across the continuum and much more balanced at the wealth end, the building of home ownership through shared equity and rent to buy.
I think it is about the tax system, and the way with which we can redistribute that tax take, that envelope. But further, things such as a universal living wage would have gone a long way to supporting all New Zealanders and better outcomes.
Yeah, good. Lisa?
Well, in addition to all of those things.
Yeah, that's good. You get to have everything and add your own.
Health Coalition would have liked to have seen more money going into public health expenditure and tackling the health-harming industries of alcohol, smoking and unhealthy food.
Murray, one thing.
And I'll finish where I started, which is the cost of housing now for people. I didn't find it in the budget. I was down in the budget lock-up yesterday. It wasn't mentioned. I think we're just avoiding the issue.
Yeah, agree. And I think for me, I'm going to ask Reverend to come and do the final karakia. But I think it's listen to the heretics, listen to the people in the community, listen to people on the ground. And Rob Campbell, who we all know, who left Whatuora very spectacularly, talked about the problem with punakitanga, the inward-looking beltway in Wellington, and the need to look outwards to community and to devolve resources, decision-making, and ideas and innovation to the community. Gosh, if we could do that, I think would make a huge difference. So thank you, everybody, for being here today. Thank you to the panel. It's the day after Budget Day is always a good day to really dig into the detail, but I really appreciate you all turning up today for such an important discussion. And I'd like to turn now to Reverend Stephen to do the karakia.
Thank you everybody for coming out. Since we've been in here, the temperature's dropped about 8 degrees outside. It's raining, it's an awful day. Any other Friday, you'd be calling in to say you're working from home. So I'd like to invite you. There's plenty of food at the back, there's plenty of coffee. So some of our guests have come into town, so they're not going anywhere in a hurry. So it's an opportunity for us to continue to network and talk about these issues, build some connections between the organisations that we are part of. So please, I'm going to say the final karakia, but I would hope that you can stay and help us eat some of that food and drink some of that coffee. So let's pray briefly. God, go before us into this day, into this week and into this year. May your spirit of wisdom and compassion challenge us, inspire us, guide us, resource us, to be the people and country you have called us to be. God of challenge and of change, of aroha and hope, bless us and all that we do in and through Christ, our friend and guide. Amen. Thanks, everyone.